Hi, hope you're doing well. I'm going to play this part of a deposition Trump did in 2016. This is at the time when he had leased out the old post office in Washington, D.C., turned it into a hotel, a bar, and then he wanted a restaurant. So he got somebody to lease the restaurant part of the building. They had it all fixed up. It was getting ready to open, hadn't opened yet. And then Trump made some nasty remarks about immigrants and Mexicans. Two of his employees quit over his remarks. And then eventually the person who was going to try to open a restaurant in that building for Trump, he also left and he stopped paying rent. So Trump was upset. He said, hey, he signed a contract. He owes me rent. He didn't feel he did anything wrong to hurt his business by saying nasty things about immigrants and Mexicans. But obviously, the person who was opening the restaurant felt differently.
And you understood that that was an obligation that the Zakarian entity had.
That's right.
And did you also understand in Section 36D of the lease that the tenant agreed to hire and maintain reasonably adequate personnel for the efficient service of its customers?
Yes.
Do you understand, as a businessman, understanding you're not a lawyer and I don't want to know what your lawyers told you, but do you generally understand that in every contract, and particularly in every lease, there is a covenant of good faith and fair dealing on the part of both parties implied into every lease?
I don't know how you define that. I mean, I just don't know. I just know we have a lease that said you're going to occupy a premises. We took it off the market. We thought we had a deal. We had a deal for quite some time. And, I mean, he just didn't live up to his deal.
But my question is, do you understand that there is a duty of good faith and fair dealing that's implied on to the part of both parties in every lease deal?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I want a fair deal. I just don't know what the lease is.
Do you agree generally that regardless of what's specifically written in the lease, you as the owner can't then interfere with the tenant's right and duty to do what he's required and entitled to do under the lease, which is operate and profit from a successful restaurant?
I just don't know what the lease says. It's a very big lease. I don't know what the lease says.
Yeah. Well, my question, sir, respectfully, was that apart from what the lease says, whatever the lease says, do you understand that you can't then go and just interfere in some way with the tenant's right and obligation to open and profit from a successful restaurant?
Objection calls for a legal opinion.
I just don't know. I mean, we're not interfering. We didn't interfere. We gave him the premises. He chose not to take the premises, and so I mean, I haven't interfered with him.
As a business person, do you understand that you could, well, strike that. Is it your understanding as a business person that you could go and announce outside Mr. Zakarian's restaurant that he's a terrible chef?
Objection.
I think I could do that, actually. I mean, if he, let's say he was doing a bad job, let's say he opened a restaurant, he wasn't doing a good job, and somebody asked me, I think I could probably say I didn't like his restaurant. That doesn't mean I'm right or wrong, but I could probably say that, and he could counter me, but he'd still be paying his rent, and still be serving, and still would have control over the premises.
Do you think that you could go stand outside his restaurant and say, you'll get food poisoning if you eat here, don't eat here?
Objection.
Probably could say that, but I wouldn't say that, but I probably could say that.
And when you say you could say that, you could say it without violating any duties under the lease.
I don't know what the lease
Objection.
says.
Calls for a legal opinion. Also calls for speculation.
I just don't know what the lease says.
But
You
if
know,
it,
once you have a lease, you know, when you have a lease, you have a lease, and I just don't know what the lease says as to that.
I will tell you, the lease doesn't specifically say you can't go stand outside and say you can't eat here. And the lease doesn't say you can't do any of these things. So just assuming the lease doesn't specifically address it, is it your testimony that you could say, stand outside his restaurant saying don't eat here? You as the owner.
Well,
Same objection.
over the years, I've seen many landlord-tenant disputes, and I've seen horrible things said both ways. But the tenant is never released from paying his rent. I've seen unbelievable disputes where people are fighting like cats and dogs, and the tenant keeps paying the rent.
Well, the question is though, could you stand outside his restaurant with a sign saying do not eat here?
Speculation. Legal conclusion.
I just don't know. I really don't know. I guess I could. If, you know, he's got to pay his rent, and he would have to challenge me or go to court to have the sign removed. Normally what would happen in a case like that is you would be hired, you'd go to court to get the sign removed.
But you think you would be within your rights to do it, as far as the lease is concerned, and your obligations as a landlord?
Well, I think he'd have to pay his rent, yeah, and he could go to court and have me take down the sign.
Do you think that you, under the, in terms of your obligations as the owner of the property, do you think that you could put out statements saying that Mr. Zakarian is a racist?
Objection.
Yeah, I guess if he was a racist, I could. If he was a racist, I could do that.
Do you think that would impact his ability to run and profit from successful restaurants?
That I don't know. I mean, he's got a lease. He's got to. I don't know. That he's got a lease. He's got to pay his. He's got to pay his rent. You know, you can't. If somebody says that would mean that every document ever signed, if somebody gets into a verbal dispute, that would mean all of the many leases all over this country would be terminated because somebody is, you know, got into a verbal dispute. I mean, that would mean arbitrators would have to be set up for what is a verbal dispute. You know, just you couldn't, you wouldn't have a country of laws. I mean, it would be a mess if you went by a standard like that. He's got a lease. He pays his rent. He can go to court and challenge me. He can go to court and sue me. He can sue me for libel if I said something like that. But I think he'd have to continue to operate his restaurant and pay his rent.
Similarly, would your answer be the same with respect to assuming that you stood outside his restaurant and said that Mr. Zakarian was anti-Hispanic? Do you think that would interfere with his ability to operate a successful restaurant?
He'd go to court and he'd have me taking, you know, the sign down or however method you wanted to talk about. But you'd go to court and you'd ask for a judgment that I would take down the sign.
Do you think if the word got out that Mr. Zakarian were anti-Hispanic, that it would potentially affect the success of his restaurant?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Okay. You understand, I'm sure, that what brings us together today is the decision that Mr. Zakarian and his entity made in the wake of the comments that you made when you announced your candidacy for president in June of 2016.
Okay.
And we have the transcript of what was said, but I don't think we need to go through all of it, but specifically focusing on the comments about Mexicans and immigrants and making comments about Mexicans.
Illegal immigrants, yes, illegal.
And I
Which
understand.
is a very big topic in this country. And which is a topic that, you know, has led to my nomination in a major party in the country. So it's not a very out there topic.
with respect to the speech that you made, and specifically the focus on Mexicans and immigrants, did you write this statement in advance? Was it written?
No.
And did you plan in advance what you were going to say?
Yes.
Okay. Did you talk to other people about it?
No.
Did you give any thoughts to the effect that your statement relative to Mexicans and immigrants would have on tenants in your current or future projects?
No. No, I didn't. I didn't at all.
You believe your comments have been misinterpreted by the media, correct?
Perhaps so. Yeah, I think the media is very dishonest. But all I'm doing is bringing up a situation which is very real about illegal immigration. And I think, most people think I'm right.
And would you agree that you've taken the position that the media has misinterpreted your comments and liberal groups have misinterpreted your comments?
Well, I don't know. Some have misinterpreted them, some haven't. I mean, so the voters, I don't think, have. I got more votes than anybody in the history of the Republican Party primaries by a lot. And, that's pretty mainstream when you think about it.
You have definitely tapped into something.
Something, right? It's possible that I'll help him as opposed to hurt him.
Help who?
If he had the restaurant, it would be helped as opposed to hurt.
Why do you think that?
Because you just said it. I mean, I've tapped into something, and I've tapped into illegal immigration. I've tapped into other things also. But, when you get more votes than anybody in the history of the party by far, more than Ronald Reagan, more than Richard Nixon, more than Dwight D. Eisenhower, who won the Second World War, that's pretty mainstream when you think about it.
There have been a number of businesses that have terminated their relationships with you in the wake of particularly the comments regarding Mexicans and immigrants, correct?
Well, there was no extension. Macy's was an example. No extension. I'm not even sure we had a deal with Macy's, but we ceased that relationship, yes.
And they publicly attributed it to the comments regarding Mexicans.
I don't know. I think so, yes.
And would the same be the case for Univision?
But I didn't have a lease with Macy's.
Right.
Okay. I didn't have a lease. I didn't have that kind of a deal. It was just a month-to-month deal. With Univision, I had a signed contract. We went to court, and they paid a substantial amount of money to me.
To settle?
Yes.
And what was your understanding of the reason for Univision terminating the relationship with you?
I guess they didn't like my comments. I think they made a mistake. I think they feel they might have made a mistake, but you'll have to ask them. But I guess they didn't like my comments.
And is the same the case with NBC?
Well, NBC wanted to renew me on The Apprentice, but I told them I can't do it. But they did, the Miss Universe was not nearly as important to them. But NBC, that all worked out very well. I don't know exactly what their reasoning was, but I can tell you they wanted to renew me very badly on The Apprentice.
But it was you who said not doing that.
I couldn't do it because I was doing this.
There are only so many hours in the day.
Well, you also have the equal time provisions. In other words,
Right, yeah.
I'm
Got
not
it.
allowed, essentially I'm not allowed to do
Got
a
it.
show
Right.
and run for office.
Free advertising.
Which is, I think, unfair, but it's one of those things. And also, it is a time thing, but but you do actually have a legal reason as to why you can't do it. You would have to give every other candidate equal time, meaning 2 hours of primetime television. And I have a feeling they wouldn't like that.
Probably not. You also had a relationship with CERTA.
Yes,
What was the nature of the relationship with
Mattresses.
CERTA?
I just want to jump in and just caution the witness to the extent that what you're being asked might intrude upon confidentiality agreements or.
Okay, fine. Yes,
You had a relationship with CERTA,
yes,
Contractual,
yes.
and CERTA pulled out of that relationship in the wake of your campaign comments as
Well,
well,
there was no
correct?
extension or something, yes.
And did you have any understanding of what their reason for wanting to?
Not particular, I wasn't involved in it too much.
Did it cause you any concern that all of these entities wanted to apparently distance themselves from you in the wake of your comments?
You know, I'm a big boy, I understand. I've been making these statements, by the way, for many years. This is not just new. You know, this isn't, when your client signed his lease, my views were out there very, very strongly.
Well, you would agree with me, wouldn't you, Mr. Trump, that they've gotten a lot more press in the last year?
No, I mean, maybe more, but you know, I can tell you that, again, some people will do better because of it. And maybe some people won't. I can't answer that, but some people will do better. But I've been very strong on these. I've been very consistent. I've been very strong on the things that I said for years.
Debbie, will we have a moment to take a quick?
I would be grateful.
Okay, great.
Thank you.